In this video, we're going to explore what you do after you've built your business model canvas, how you turn those into an action plan. So the point is that when you do a business model canvas, the canvas itself is not the outcome. It's just a canvas in which to explore. Ultimately, you have to find the gaps that you want to close to basically enact your strategy. Now, these could be gaps that are strengths that you want to double down on, but you still have a gap to close from where you are to where you want to be. They could be weaknesses that you want to close the gap on, and that creates a gap that you want to close. Or it could be a pivot, something new or that you want to shift in what you do, and that creates a gap that you need to close. The point is that you have to start by identifying the gaps on your business model canvas, and then we come to mapping those strategic gaps. And so first I want to show you how to think about them as different types of gaps. We're going to use a tool I call the Strategic Gaps Map. The point is that you have different types of gaps, and we have to pick the appropriate course of action depending on what type of gap it is. So on this chart, we call known and unknown gaps. The known gaps are the things that we already know how to solve. We have to choose to solve them. You might know very well how to open up a new distribution center. You might not know how to enter a new market that you've never been in before. So those are known or unknown gaps. We also have discrete or continuous. Discrete gaps are those that have a very defined outcome. Continuous are ones that you could spend your entire life trying to close that gap, and it will be a lifelong pursuit. So once you've identified the gaps on your business model canvas, it's time to really understand how they fit on this canvas. If you have a known discrete gap, so this is something like opening up a new storefront. It might be your 1001th store. You're opening one more. Well, then you pretty much have a project plan, right? You know what to do. Build out your project plan. You can declare success, and you know how to manage that particular gap. That's a known gap, a known discrete gap. A known continuous gap is usually a performance variable. So let's say it's safety incidents. Well, safety incidents are primarily about behavior, but also about daily actions. There's no one initiative that you can just eliminate safety problems. It's a continual pursuit. So it very often looks like just focused efforts where you manage that particular variable over time with an ongoing set of actions where when you see a problem, you start determining new actions that you're going to take. So it's really a focus, a regular focus on the right metrics and the actions to close that performance gap. And so that's a known continuous type of gap. Now, in most execution or operational plans, many of our gaps fall into these categories. But in particular with strategy, we have a lot of gaps that are the unknowns. These are important to identify because not knowing what to do about the unknowns can actually inadvertently shrink the ambitiousness of our strategy because we don't go after the stuff in a deliberate way that we do not know. So the first is the unknown discrete. This might be a new feature, a new product, a new customer engagement that you don't know if it's feasible, right? And so fundamentally, this is about experimentation. Right? If you've been selling your product online and you want to see if you can sell it face-to-face, well, don't just open up 17 storefronts. Open up a pop-up shop at a flea market or some other location to test a little bit more to learn what you need to about the feasibility. If you have a product feature that you want to integrate, well, what tests can you do to test the feasibility of that feature? Fundamentally, experimentation drives learning when it's done well. And so the purpose of this is to drive the right kind of learning through experimentation to answer the question that you started around for that particular gap. The next type of unknown gap is the continuous gap. this is something where you might want to determine the market size. Well, we're always pursuing that. The market's moving, it's never precise. Any day the market might be ill-defined. And so there might be an actual answer to the size of the market, but we're never going to get a perfect answer. This is the best case, right? But right now, we might have a large gap where we don't know if it's between 1 million and 1 billion. Whatever the gap is, if the gap is too large for you to be sure that you can be successful, well, then we have to deliberately close this gap. Now that means two things. What are the actions you're going to take to start to move our understanding and create a smaller gap, create more assurance about what the answer is? Maybe you do some research and you get from 100 million to half billion, and you've closed the gap quite a bit. Maybe you can do some testing of customers and you can close the gap even more. Fundamentally, the point is, what is my action to start to get more confidence and narrow the range of my answer? The second part of this is, when do I want to make a decision? How much confidence do I need? Can I have a little confidence, or do I need a lot of confidence? This will determine how far we need to go, how aggressive we need to be in gathering knowledge before we can make a decision. The reason this is so important to define in advance is we can do a whole lot of work to get an effort to close the gap, but we're still not confident enough, so we want to do more, and we're still not confident enough, so we want to do more. And we just have this endless pursuit, which we never define success for. So these two ingredients here is, how are we going to close the gap, and how much confidence do we need in order to declare success? Now, once we start to understand our gaps, we can put our gaps in the appropriate bucket. And then that allows us to craft a more deliberate, purposeful, and thoughtful action plan to essentially deliver on our strategy. So now we have the opportunity to see how this all fits together in terms of a set of sequential steps where you can drive your strategy. We start with the business model canvas. This is a chance to have conversations, dialogues, or just individual thought process to explore your business model. And whether you're driving deeper on the same vector you've been on, or opening up and pivoting in a different direction, you're able to identify the different gaps that might exist on your business model canvas. We then use that to start to map the gaps on our strategic gap map. This allows us to understand what type of gaps we're dealing with and start to develop the appropriate action plan. Now, while there's more you can learn on the internet and through books on the business model canvas, because this is my creation, probably the only chance for you to hear about this strategic gap map. But then you still just have a bunch of gaps and a way to deal with it. You then need to start to drive gap closing actions. This is essentially converting your strategy into execution. Now this can be this can be project plans, this can be teams that you assign, this can be A3 problem solving. It can be a lot of different things, but fundamentally you want to sort of get out of strategy mode and start to drive in execution mode the right things, whether they be learning gaps, problem solving, projects that you need to drive. Ultimately, this all has to manifest in a very clear, coordinated, and cohesive set of actions. Once you've done that, now you have strategy. Everything else is thought up until that point, but strategy requires action. You have to make sure you're converting all of those ideas that you've explored in building your strategy into an action plan to deliver on that strategy.